The sun was just beginning to rise over the vast plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The soft glow touched the tall grasses, making them shimmer gently with the morning dew. A light wind carried the earthy scent of savanna, and birds began their songs, filling the air with a quiet, lively melody. Everything seemed peaceful, almost untouched by human life, except for one figure moving anxiously at the edge of the open field. A lioness was pacing back and forth near the tree line, her movements sharp and full of tension. Her ears twitched constantly, picking up every distant sound. Her eyes, wide and alert, darted repeatedly toward a nearby thicket. Occasionally, she would let out a low, urgent growl, a sound that carried through the still morning air and made the hairs on the back of anyone's neck stand up. This was not the usual confident stride of a predator in her territory. Every motion, every glance, spoke of desperation. Nearby, some villagers were beginning to notice the unusual behavior. They stopped what they were doing, quietly observing from a safe distance. Many of them were frightened. Seeing a lioness up close was already a rare event, but seeing one act in such a frantic way was unsettling. Some whispered to each other, unsure what they were witnessing. One person thought she might be hurt, another worried that she was hunting, while a few felt a strange sense of curiosity, wondering why a wild animal would behave in such an unusual manner. Among them, a local wildlife worker had just finished checking on some traps further down the field. When he saw the lioness, something in his gut told him this was not a normal sight. He noticed how her eyes were fixed not on him or the villagers, but on a small, shadowed area within the thicket. His heart began to beat faster. He had seen many animals in trouble before, but instinct told him that this situation needed immediate attention. There was a silent message in the way she moved, a mix of fear, hope, and urgency. He decided he had to approach carefully, but even before he could take a step, he watched her lower her body slightly, as if crouching, then suddenly rise and pace again. The tension in her body was visible in every ripple of her muscles. As he walked slowly toward the tree line, keeping his distance, he began to notice more signs of distress. The lioness would occasionally stop, glance sharply at him, then look back toward the thicket and let out a soft, plaintive roar. It wasn't loud enough to be threatening, but it carried a tone that seemed almost human in its emotion. She was calling for help, though in a way that only someone attuned to the subtle cues of wildlife could understand. The wildlife worker remembered the countless stories of mother animals in distress, risking everything for their young. He felt a pang of empathy. This lioness was not just pacing. She was clearly trying to communicate something important. The sun climbed higher, and the heat began to touch the tall grasses, creating small waves of shimmer in the air. The villagers watched in quiet awe, noticing the way her movements became slightly more frantic as time passed. Every once in a while, she would stop and lower her head, sniffing the air, her nose twitching as it tried to locate the source of the problem. The wildlife worker, moving carefully step by step, spotted what had caught her attention. There, tangled in a patch of thorny bushes, was a tiny lion cub. Its small body trembled, and its soft whimpers were barely audible over the morning breeze. It was caught in a precarious position, its tiny legs struggling against the sharp branches. The sight made the worker's stomach tighten. He could see the fear in the little cub's eyes, a reflection of the terror its mother must be feeling. The lioness froze when she saw that someone had noticed. Her body stiffened, and her tail flicked with anxious energy. But she did not run. She continued to watch intently, pacing in short bursts, her growls now mixed with soft whimpers. It was as though she was weighing the risk of letting a human get closer against the need to save her child. The wildlife worker understood the unspoken message. She wanted help, but she also needed to know that he could be trusted. He crouched low to appear less threatening and spoke in a calm, soft voice, even though he knew the lioness might not understand the words. The tone, however, mattered. Many animals respond to the energy behind a voice rather than the language itself. Slowly, he moved a little closer, keeping his movements deliberate and slow, avoiding sudden gestures. The lioness watched him every step, her body coiled like a spring, ready to act if necessary, but also remaining close to her cub. The tension in the air was palpable, a fragile balance between trust and fear. Moments passed like hours. The cub wriggled slightly, causing a small branch to snap. The lioness's growl intensified, sharp and urgent. The worker froze, understanding the warning, but also knowing that hesitation could put the cub in further danger. He adjusted his movements, speaking softly in a soothing tone, and slowly inched closer to the trapped cub. The lioness followed every motion with her eyes, her body tense yet strangely controlled. She had made a choice. She trusted just enough for a chance to save her baby. Finally, the worker reached a point where he could see the cub clearly. Its small eyes looked up at him with fear, its tiny body shaking from the struggle and the cold morning air. The lioness stepped back slightly, still pacing in short bursts, giving him a space to work while keeping a watchful eye. Every muscle in her body radiated both anxiety and hope. It was a delicate dance of trust, instinct, and courage. The scene was quiet except for the occasional rustle of the grass and the soft whimpers of the cub. The worker felt a deep sense of responsibility, knowing that the next few moments could change the course of these lives forever. He took a slow breath, steadying his hands, and prepared to make the first careful move to free the trapped cub. The lioness watched him intently, a silent plea echoing in their depths, and he understood completely. The race against time had begun, and nothing would stop him from trying to save the little life waiting among the thorns. The sun rose higher, casting long golden shadows across the field. The air was warm, carrying the scent of the earth and the wild grasses. Everything seemed still, holding its breath, as if the world itself was watching this small, incredible moment unfold. The wildlife worker slowly reached the thorny branches surrounding the cub, his movements careful, deliberate, and filled with empathy. The lioness continued to pace, growl softly, and glance at him with an intensity that spoke volumes. She was not aggressive. She was desperate, protective, and trusting in the most profound way. This encounter was more than a rescue. It was a connection. It was a moment of understanding between species, a silent agreement that life mattered, that compassion could bridge even the gap between human and wild animal. The worker felt a wave of emotion wash over him, a mix of awe, fear, and deep responsibility. He knew the next moments would be crucial, but he was ready. The lioness's eyes locked onto his, a silent plea echoing in their depths, and he understood completely. The race against time had begun, and nothing would stop him from trying to save the little life waiting among the thorns. The wildlife worker stayed perfectly still for a moment, observing the lioness. She had moved slightly away from the thicket, but kept glancing back, her body tense and alert. It was clear that she would not leave her cub, and yet she seemed to understand that the human meant no harm. Her eyes followed every movement with a careful intensity, and even from a distance, the connection between them was unmistakable. The worker slowly adjusted his position, keeping his movements minimal. He noticed that the cub was not only tangled, but also exhausted, its small limbs trembling with each attempt to free itself. He realized that if he didn't act quickly but cautiously, the cub could be seriously injured or even worse. Carefully, he began clearing the smaller branches and thorns obstructing the cub. He moved with deliberate slowness, speaking softly in a calm voice, knowing that sudden actions could trigger panic in the mother lioness. Every so often, the lioness growled, a low rumble that seemed both protective and anxious. She paced in short loops, eyes never leaving the worker or her cub. It was as if she was giving him a chance, silently asking him to help in the only way she could communicate. Finally, the worker found a way to carefully lift the cub's small body from the thorns. He moved slowly, making sure to support its tiny legs and soft frame. The cub squirmed slightly but did not cry out, sensing the careful, protective approach. The lioness's growls softened into a steady, low rumble, her gaze never leaving the human hands holding her baby. Every step he took was measured, deliberate, and filled with care. As he freed the cub, he noticed the exhaustion in its eyes and the delicate trembling of its body. The sun had risen higher, casting warmth across the savannah, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of the earth and the grasses. The lioness shifted her stance slightly, remaining protective but less tense, as if she understood that the cub was now safe from immediate danger. The worker held the tiny creature gently, feeling the rapid heartbeat under his hands, and knew that he had only a few moments to ensure it was completely freed and unharmed. The villagers watched silently, Their initial fear replaced with awe and admiration. No one had ever witnessed such a scene. A wild lioness, fierce yet vulnerable, seemingly pleading with a human for help. The emotional gravity of the moment was palpable. Even from a distance, it was clear that this was a rare, extraordinary encounter, one that spoke of empathy, courage, and a fragile connection between human and animal. Step by step, the worker moved closer to a safer spot, gently lifting the cub away from the thorny area. The lioness followed closely but cautiously, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, ensuring that her child was never out of reach. It was a delicate balance of trust and instinct, and every movement mattered. The cub, now free, nuzzled slightly against the worker's hands, its tiny body still trembling but alive and safe. The lioness paused, standing a few meters away, her head slightly lowered and her ears alert. She emitted a low, almost reverent growl, a sound that seemed to convey both relief and gratitude. It was as if she was acknowledging the human's role in this rescue, silently recognizing the effort made to understand and respond to her desperate plea. The worker, feeling the weight of the moment, took a step back, giving her space while keeping the cub safe in his arms. Minutes felt like hours as the three of them remained in that shared silence. The cub, now calm and still, rested in the worker's hands, and the lioness maintained her protective vigil. The bond formed in those tense moments was invisible but unmistakable, a bridge built on trust, patience, and the mutual understanding of life's fragility. Finally, the worker guided the cub to a soft patch of grass nearby, placing it gently on the ground while keeping his hands close, ready to intervene if needed. The lioness approached carefully, sniffing and nudging her cub with a tenderness that belied her powerful form. She pressed her body close to the cub, licking it softly, a mother's instinct in full display. The worker stood back, allowing the reunion to unfold naturally, watching in awe at the depth of connection between mother and child. The morning grew warmer as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the savannah. The lioness remained close to her cub, pacing gently at first, then settling down on the grass while keeping her ears and eyes alert. The worker watched carefully, knowing that even a moment of carelessness could undo the fragile trust that had been built. The cub, now freed from the thorns, looked around with wide, curious eyes, trembling slightly but already calmer in the presence of his mother. The wildlife worker knew that the next step was crucial, getting the cub completely safe and ensuring that the lioness felt no need to react aggressively. He inched closer, moving slowly and deliberately. The lioness tensed for a moment, low growls rumbling from deep in her chest, but she did not retreat. She simply shifted her stance, keeping a close watch, her eyes locked onto Worker, almost studying his intentions, measuring whether he would continue to act with care and respect. Gently, the Worker extended his hands, offering a small blanket to lift the cub onto, giving him a safer way to move the little lion. The cub hesitated for a moment, instinctively pressing against the grass, but a soft, encouraging hum from the Worker and a calm, rumbling reassurance from the mother nudged it forward. Slowly, the cub allowed itself to be lifted onto the blanket, its small legs curling in, eyes blinking against the bright sunlight. The lioness growled softly, almost a warning, but made no move to intervene. Step by step, the Worker guided the cub away from the thorny patch. The lioness followed, pacing alongside him, but always keeping the cub between herself and the human. Each step was measured, cautious, and filled with silent communication. It was as if they were negotiating a fragile understanding, one that balanced instinct and trust. The villagers watched quietly, amazed at the unfolding scene, their initial fear replaced by wonder and admiration.